Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Hey, podcast listeners, Al Martin here yet again. We're at it again. We just keep coming and we never stop coming. That's how it works. And today, speaking of, we got David Hirschfeld, who was the founder and the CEO at Tekyz Corp. He's a 35-year software development veteran. He is a former physics student at UCLA. He spans leadership roles across numerous tech giants, including Computer Associates, Texas Instruments, Intel, Motorola, before launching his first startup. And he's, I think, been in the startup world ever since. So we're going to learn a little about Tekyz, his design methods for startups, which is a systematic approach that minimizes risks and accelerates software companies' success. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you for that really nice introduction, Al.
And he just got through mentioning to me he's got a cold, but I told him it's like he's got a DJ voice, so it's perfect.
I just have to bottle this voice.
Perfect. All right. Look, so here's how I always start off, man. I start off with just getting to know you a little bit. If you could talk to your experience, your history, what brings you here, that would be great.
Okay, sure. So I started out, as Al was mentioning, I started out a long time ago working in enterprise with Texas Instruments and Computer Associates. And then I did consulting running projects at Intel, Motorola, Allied Signal, and Arizona Public Service. And then started my own software company, kind of a mini ERP when Windows 3.1, this is dating me, first came out, which was the first version of Windows that was really a usable version. And it was logistics, route distribution, inventory management. And despite every effort on both my partners and my part, we ended up growing it anyway to 800 customers in 22 countries over the next 8 years and sold it to a publicly traded firm. So I'm thinking, okay, I know what I'm doing, right, as far as launching software companies. And then about 6 years later, I started another software company in the wholesale automotive industry where wholesale dealers could trade cars between each other. And I was getting traction
Dealer
on
Crossing?
that. That was Dealer Crossing. Right, exactly.
First one was Component Seeker?
First one was Vendmaster.
Vendmaster. Okay, sorry. I was just getting the names, put the context with the startup. Sorry, keep going, please.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah. And then the second one was Dealer Crossing. And we were getting a lot of traction and a lot of people on the platform, but I didn't follow the same playbook as I followed the first time, not realizing the things I did the first time that made me successful. So instead, I followed the classic, create a network of users, show traction and growing traction, and then raise money from investors and accelerate your growth. And this was a losing proposition. I did get an investor that made an offer for the amount I was looking for, which was $1.2 million at the time. But I turned him down because it came quickly and I thought they wanted too much equity and I didn't ever get another offer. So I eventually ran out of money and just decided instead of turning on the revenue engine and starting to charge my customers money, because I went the freemium route this time, I just shut it down and started Tekyz. That was 18 years ago, out of the ashes of Dealer Crossing. Right.
So you went straight from Dealer Crossing to Tekyz.
I did. And then I started doing custom software development for small to medium-sized companies and a lot of startups. During that time, I've now worked with over 90 startups and a few of them really successful. In fact, all the plays on Broadway are produced by software that we built called Stage Right Software. The Olympic opening games, the Tonys, the Emmy Awards, most cruise lines, colleges use it to produce all their stage productions. It's a wildly successful product, but that's not, it was even announced on Apple when Tim Cook announced the iPad Air to the world. He said, how has the iPad changed our lives? And he did a little video montage of 6 or 7 different apps, and Stage Right Software was one of those in the montage. So
fantastic.
Really successful, right? But that's not what happens with most startups. The vast majority of them fail. And they all fail for the same reason, because they wait way too long to validate product market fit through sales, which is what happened to me in my second company. And I didn't realize that that was the primary reason I failed till I'd seen other startups follow the same mistaken path to failure instead of the path to success, which is get your product out in front of customers, charge them something in as short a period of time as possible, because the only way you can validate product market fit is through sales.
The last one you failed on was dealer crossing. Is that what you're saying?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So the one or two before that, you really were able to identify product market fit timely, right up front. As a result, you were, had cash flow, and you were able to see success.
Right.
You're suggesting that the major failure that you see with a lot of these startups is that they often wait too long to really monetize their product.
They wait too long to try to monetize. So a lot of most startups feel the need to come out with a free beta to get feedback, and you get the wrong kind of feedback from free betas. First of all, getting people to engage with your product if they haven't paid for it is difficult in most cases. And when they do give you feedback, they don't have any investment in the product, so they're giving you feedback on things that may or may not matter to them in terms of, this is something that if you had it, I'll pay for it. And even when they say that, if you put it in, they don't necessarily pay for it because they're trying to be nice. It's very hard to get truth from customers when you're talking about your product. It's very easy to get truth from customers if you just focus on their problems, because people will talk about what they're struggling with and give you honest feedback about how much it costs them, why it's a struggle, how much it personally impacts them, what they've tried to do to mitigate those problems in the past. But when you put the product in front of them and you're talking about your features, you're not going to get the kind of honest feedback you need, which is, if you did this, I'd pay for it. If it truly had this feature, then I would use it every day. And that's a true statement. If they're a paying customer, you're much more likely to get honest responses, because then they're no longer about product market fit. So one of the big mistakes people make is they think that product market fit is what customers are telling you once they have the product, what they need. And that's not. That's called product solution fit, where for them to get value out of this thing they've paid for, this is what it's missing. Or to increase the value of the product for them, this is what it needs. And quantifying why that matters and how much value, what's the value, like what is it costing them that it will mitigate? What problem are you solving by doing those things? Focusing again on the problem, then you're working at product solution fit. You're getting them to engage and stay paying customers longer and longer, and possibly more deeply involved. Product market fit means people will buy your product at a high enough a closing ratio, at a high enough dollar value that you can start to generate a profitable margin, what I call kind of the golden ratio for SaaS companies. And it's not the same for all, but I think it's 3-to-1 in terms of what the lifetime value of that customer is versus what it costs for you to acquire that customer in terms of marketing and sales and time and effort. That's product market fit. If you're below that threshold of 3-to-1 and significantly below it, like most are at a fraction of one, then you don't have product market fit. So making a huge investment in building your product is extremely risky at this point.
So say more on 3-to-1. I want to make sure I understand that correctly. When you say 3-to-1, how does that play out in terms of the math?
Okay. So a lifetime value of a customer, let's say you're calculating that at a 2 or 3 year reach, right? They're going to pay some yearly investment over that period of time. And you have to go off of anecdotal stuff when you're first launching exactly what that life is. There's a way in pre-launch sale to specifically establish a lifetime value by offering lifetime licenses and charging them 1.5 years or 2 years of subscription fee in advance to get a lifetime license. That's one way to do it. But you need to understand what's the value of this customer over the life that they're going to have it. And depends on how long that life is calculated. If you're calculating a 10-year life, which if you're in an enterprise and certain types of software is not unreasonable because of the costs to implement it, both in terms of manpower as well as financially, then you can calculate your lifetime value over a much longer period of time because people just aren't going to change unless there's an extreme reason to do it. So whatever that lifetime value is, whatever it costs you to acquire the customer in terms of marketing costs, sales, however you're calculating your costs, if you're not getting a big enough margin between the two, you have nothing left to invest back into the company to accelerate your growth. So that's why you need this significant margin, especially early on, to be able to accelerate growth, which is what we're all after. And it has to be predictable. So that means you've sold enough product at this price. And so you've got this 3-to-1 ratio across enough of a slice of your initial target market that you can project out. If I just put this much more energy into the system in terms of marketing and sales dollars, then I should be able to close this much more business, giving me acceleration in terms of revenue.
Essentially, after you take all your cost, income is 3x and at minimum. Otherwise, you're not going to survive.
It might need to be a much higher, if you're talking about that's a life over 10 years, then you need a much higher number than that, right? So you can also normalize it, say, what's my value over 2 years or what's my value over 3 years versus what's the cost to acquire? Because maybe that's just the window that you're modeling things around. It's specific in every single situation. I just use 3-to-1 as sort of the standard ratio. And I've heard other people that coach startups use 3-to-1 before. So I was like, okay, I don't need to go against the grain or invent a new ratio, just use the one that people recognize.
I got to say, David, though, it seems pretty intuitive. Why do startups get hung up on this?
Because most startups, not all, but most of them are coming at their business at the very earliest stages because there was a problem they found that they believe they can solve, right? And they think to themselves, actually, lots of people have this problem. I believe there's a market for this, for a product that solves this problem, and I can generate and create a business around it. And that's when the problem disappears and the belief system in the product starts to happen. And this is the biggest pitfall that founders make. They believe in their vision. They believe in their product. They believe that customers will buy their product for this price because look how cool this is. Look how great it is. It eliminates this problem which you have. So of course people are going to buy it, and they believe this. They don't validate it. Most startups will do some market research to try to confirm this to some degree, but that market research is very limited in terms of its truth because you're not testing it with real customers who are saying yes or no to buying decisions. So, and what happens is you keep believing and believing, and then you put out a free trial because this is your vision, right? But this is the MVP in terms of what you're delivering. And so and founders don't feel worthy to charge for the product yet. So they put the trial out for free and start getting people on the product and getting feedback, which may be misleading and misdirecting because this is not feedback that for sure is going to result in sales most of the time. And they go through release after release after release, very often about anywhere from 18 months to 3 years before they actually force the issue of trying to charge for their product in a retail kind of price, only then to find out they can't sell the product. They don't know how to position it. They don't know who to sell it to because they haven't nailed down the early adopter properly. They don't know how to articulate the sales message, or they just have the wrong product for the wrong customer. And then it's panic, pivot, until they eventually run out of money and investors lose faith and they close up. And this happens more than 90% of the time with SaaS startups.
So you're telling me really that a customer isn't really a customer until they start paying, because if they're just using the product, by example, they're going to give you feedback, but they're going to give you product-specific feedback, which may be disconnected from whether they're actually purchased the product or what their priorities are once they do purchase the product. Right now, it's a freebie, and their priorities can be completely skewed.
Exactly. And you don't know if they'll start paying for it once you start charging without starting to charge and seeing if they'll pay for it just because they're using it. It depends on what they're using it for, how integrated it is into their own business workflows, things like that, whether they will feel they have to keep paying for it once you start charging for it, and you just don't know. So what do VCs say about all this? VCs say, create a pitch deck, build an MVP, and then come to us. And if we think this is really viable and worthwhile, and maybe you get some customers, maybe they're paying customers, then we'll fund you. But the reality of that is 1 out of every 100 pitch decks gets funded. And you're competing against people that have big advisory boards and potentially past successes in the SaaS world that VCs can leverage when they're making buying decisions. And I'm not kidding, it's 1 in 100. So typical pitch, a VC will see 3,000 pitch decks for every 30 that they fund. And even if they do fund you, in fact, I just had a conversation this morning with an incubator that is raising money for biotech companies that are in the genomic area. And he basically started this incubator because he said these biotech companies need somebody who will reduce the cost by having shared labs and focus them in terms of delivery of this new revolutionary thing that they're trying to create, because they end up failing in such massive numbers because they run out of money before they ever even get a product on the market. With a VC, even if you get funded, and those are biotech companies that get funding, even if you get funded, the stats are that 70% of those companies will fail.
What is the success rate of a startup these days? Is it directly aligned with the 1 in 100, or?
No. It's higher than that, but it's probably five. There's a lot of different things you can read. A lot of people fall under the radar and don't even get counted in stats that have invested in starting a company. But what we see, and I've corroborated this with a number of other development companies that work with startups, probably around 5%, 5 to 7% at most of SaaS, B2B SaaS startups are successful. Successful means get to a point where they're generating revenue, a profitable company, not necessarily on any kind of steep acceleration, but they're able to build a business around some kind of profitable revenue model.
So how does Tekyz help with all this? By the way, folks, Tekyz is spelled Tekyz, a little play on Tekyz. So nicely done. How do you help? What makes the difference here? What's your differentiator?
So the differentiator is a methodology we created called Launch First. Not everybody wants to do this. Our business is developing software, but I would much rather develop software that is going to successfully result in a profitable SaaS business, or help the founder fail fast and cheap. Because I've seen so many founders fail after having spent hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in some cases over many years, and losing that portion of their lives. You don't really want to say, yeah, but look at all the learning I did, right? That's not really that's what you have to say when that happens, and try to find a way to pick yourself back up. But it's much better if you can figure out really quickly, like within a few months, 4 to 6 months, this is going to be a failed venture, and do it inexpensively, but with confidence that now I've tested this market, I can see that I had the wrong idea for the wrong product, and maybe completely pivot and start something different because now you've learned enough to know what to build and what the market's going to want, or walk away and go on to whatever the next thing is that you're going to do in your life. That's empowering to do that for not a lot of money, and but still feel like you gave it a real serious shot. So what we do at Tekyz, this Launch First methodology for founders that are willing to do this, because not all founders are. We go through a very extensive niche analysis process where we identify who the early adopter is, what the top 1 or 2 problem statements related to the product that you're talking about building are addressed, what the cost of that problem is to that founder, what the personal impact is to the stakeholder that would be buying your product, what the personal impact is to them, what the channels, how you would reach them. And there's a lot of analysis that goes on. That's all metrics driven. It's not subjective. It's all metrics driven that makes it very clear who the early adopter likely is, both in terms of the market segment and the stakeholder in that market segment, and exactly how to market to them so that they'll buy your product. And then we build a high fidelity prototype, or a design prototype, It's not real software, but it looks and demos like real software. When you're demoing it, the person you're demoing it to believes that you've already built the product, even though you told them you haven't. They don't hear that because what they're looking at is so realistic. And that's a critical success factor to these pre-launch sales. And then you come up with some kind of high value sales model so that the person you're selling to, if you've targeted them properly, they have a big problem that costs them a lot of money and personally impacts them significantly enough so that they need this problem solved. They know this is a product they have to get once it's available on the market, and you give them a big enough value to get it early, they'll buy in enough numbers where you can prove product market fit before we ever even start developing the product.
Here's what I heard you say. You examine early adopters, you examine problem statements, you examine cost, you examine channels to success, develop a pre-launch, and then you outline or develop a high-value sales model.
Exactly. A high-value sales model and a marketing funnel to reach those early adopters. And then you're getting feedback from real potential customers in terms of why they wouldn't buy this now. If it's really that big a problem and you're giving them that big an opportunity early, why wouldn't they pay for it now? Because that's going to tell you a lot about how they're going to respond to your product once it's on the market.
Where does your differentiator come in, though? I mean, is it really in the assets and the methods you described, or is it also in the development that you add on top of this to help provide a development arm to some of these startups?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, our goal is to get them over that viability barrier, what I call that's that point at which they actually ask the customer to pay, and they're either paying or not. If they're not paying, then they're bouncing off that viability. If they're paying in enough numbers, then you're proving you've got product market fit and you've got a viable business. And you use that revenue to now help fund development. And also, if you decide you do want to get investors, in addition to that, you're showing market traction and a growing revenue model to those investors, which most startups struggle to get. So our value is being able to get to sales, basically putting the sales engine first before building the software. That's why it's called Launch First. And then building the best software possible. Tekyz.com, it says hyper exceptional development team. And I don't expect anybody to believe it just because it says it in the heading above the fold on our website. But I expect people to ask me for evidence. What does that mean? And if you work in an exceptional manner, you just as a default produce certain artifacts from that exceptional work you do that typical development teams don't produce. And so I show people what that means to be exceptional and why I believe it's exceptional. And most people agree with, yes, this is considered exceptional compared to what they see from other software development companies that are sharing what they do. So then we bring that to the table as well.
When do you know you cross the chasm of, hey, we got product market fit?
These are actually really killer questions. I've been on a lot of interviews. Nobody's asked me these questions so pointedly, but they are the right questions to be asking. So we have that formula calculated up right at the beginning, right? We have a lifetime value because we're offering a lifetime license, even though we may have some future sales to that with new modules and things like that. We don't want to assume that. Sometimes we might, depends on the product and the market and things like that. But in general, you know what your lifetime value of that customer is because you're selling a lifetime license. What it costs us to acquire that customer is 1/3 or less of what that lifetime license is costing us. Then we can do that repeatedly with enough.
But how many customers do you need?
Fluke. In the case of a real estate investment portfolio system, we needed 15 or so to really be confident that this wasn't a fluke, right? Because we're selling licenses between $500 and $30,000 because it was based on number of doors that they were managing in their real estate investment community. We generated $68,000 in the first 60 days from pre-launch sales and 23 licenses. But at about 13 or 14 licenses, we were confident that this was a predictable, repeatable model. For another one, took 2 sales. It was for clinical trial software where healthcare companies doing genetic injections to cure genetic diseases. had to do their clinical trials, specialized clinical trial software for that market. We did 2 demos, sold both of the demos for $250,000 each. We knew we had product market fit there. It just depends on the particular client, the particular market, right, to when we're confident that we've achieved it. Part of it also is what is it actually effort and cost to get in front of your stakeholders and a number of other factors. But it's different for every single project. A lot of that, there's not a very clear calculation. Some of it's sort of just by feel, but everybody is pretty comfortable that we've got a number that makes sense.
I got to believe startups tend to underestimate their cost and overestimate their revenue.
Every one of them. Yeah. They're the rare exception. Really, really rare exception, like Stage Right Software. I did not think he could recoup his investment when he first came to me. That was like 11 years ago when the iPad was brand new. I even told him that in our very first meeting because I like to be honest. Well, this was stupid on my part because there's just things I didn't understand about product market fit still at that time, that he had ingredients that I did not understand. 3 years later, and this was a $199 product in the App Store for iPads, and I couldn't imagine it was a complicated app, managing a stage production, the whole thing. Anyway, so he ended up with 50,000 downloads from the App Store in the first 2.5, 3 years of this $199 product. And so he blew out his numbers way more than he was expecting, and certainly more than me. And some of the things he had that I just didn't realize how important they were is he was solving his own problem because he was a choreographer, producer on Broadway. He had reach to every other choreographer, producer, not only in Broadway, but in the country, and many in the world. And he had reach to marketing and advertising and trades like Variety Magazine, New York Times, the Good Morning America. He was on all those after the product was launched. Them announcing this new way of, using the iPad to produce your Broadway play. And of course, everybody got excited about it. So those are ingredients that make a big difference in terms of whether somebody can be wildly successful or just another has-been.
How do potential clients engage with Tekyz? I mean, is this like Shark Tank?
No, we don't take any equity. In rare cases, people ask us if we'll take some equity all the time. Partly to reduce costs, but as much because they want to have us really committed to their projects. But I don't, we're committed. We have this concept of being exceptional, and that we have all kinds of evidence. And if we require to commit to a customer by being part of their, from an equity perspective, then that wouldn't say much about us. So we don't take equity unless it's offered to us, and sometimes we accept it, but most of the time we try not to, because that tangles us up in ways that negatively can affect the relationship in terms of the business to business relationship. So and we want our customers to own the products and get the rewards of the success of their products, because they're the ones making it happen, not us. We're mechanics, we're building things, but they're the ones that have to drive the business and make it successful on a day-to-day basis. So if they want to use us, then we're typically fee-based. I mean, we're always fee-based, but there's some fixed price. Most of it's time and materials. The way we do time and materials is also part of what makes us exceptional. I'll be able to show anybody that wants to talk to me what that means. I don't want to waste their time on the show, though, because it's kind of boring, right? But they reach out to me by going to tekyz.com, spelled TEKYZ.com, and then just filling in the contact us form and tell me what's going on, or you can even email me at david@tekyz.com, which won't be in the show link, but if you made it this far into the podcast broadcast, you deserve to get my email address.
Fantastic. All right. Well, great. We haven't mentioned AI once in this podcast so far, so I'm going to take care of that right now. Are most of the opportunities and ideas coming from AI right now?
Coming from AI or are AI solutions? So
yes, the answer is yes. I mean, I guess
don't know. Most of the ideas still don't necessarily come from AI, although AI is helping people refine them. Most of the ideas, and the best ones usually, come from a personal problem that somebody's struggling with in their business, or it can be in their life, but most of the time it's in their business. And they're dealing with it on a daily or at least weekly basis. So it's always top of mind, and they can easily articulate the personal impact it has on them as well as the financial impact it's having. And those are two independent numbers. I can explain in all kinds of detail why they have to be independent, but it's critical success factor of figuring out when you've identified an early adopter, because both those things have to be high separately from each other. And then if that person in an industry full of people just like them doing similar things, and struggling with the same problems they're struggling with, and they have reach to some community of those people, these are usually where these ideas come from and where they get fleshed out. And if you're there, then you already are well on your way to potentially successful business opportunity because you have such a personal relationship to the problem. So the only other thing I want to say is, and then the founders that can stay focused on the problem and stay busy talking to their customers about their problems or potential customers constantly all the time, never talking about their product or their features because nobody cares. Those are the ones that consistently find a path to success. Most founders at some point lose sight of the problem. They think they are not losing sight because they keep thinking of features that fix problems, but nobody cares about the features, and they're not focused on the problem, because you're only focused on the problem if you're talking to the customers about how they're struggling, what their struggles are, where the struggles are. But founders forget all about the problem when they go forward with their products.
That kind of leads me to my next question, which is lessons learned. You've already talked about product market fit. You've talked about not staying on the problem. But what are some of the other common patterns that you see, almost red flags, if you will, that founders tend to run into?
Okay, yeah. One last thing about the AI, almost every project we're working on now is either deeply AI or AI related. So I wanted to throw that in as well.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
I kind of skirted past AI, because of the way you asked the question. I kind of skirted what makes a really successful product idea.
Yeah.
How you've got a good chance that it's going to be successful before you even spend any money on it. But you don't know for sure until you've gone through all the other things I was talking about. Now, as far as other red flags, when somebody thinks this is going to be wildly successful, it's really good chance it's going to be a unicorn, right? Those are code words for I'm going to fail.
Okay. There are unicorns out there. How do you know this isn't a unicorn?
I don't know. Well, I don't know, but I'm happy to take anybody's bet that it's not, just because look at the odds. Yeah. How many? 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000, whatever it is, that become a unicorn. I mean, this is such a rarefied air that to think that you're going to be a unicorn is just, if you're not a billionaire to begin with and you can throw endless money at something, then it's just hubris. Well, it's the result of social media and news broadcasting all this information about unicorns over and over and over again, which are not that many. If you think about how many unicorns you hear about, it's dozens, maybe hundreds over a decade, right? That you've heard. I don't know, hundreds, but a lot, right? Over a decade. That belies the million failures that came before it. So you got to think in terms of, this is high. The most successful CEOs. There was a episode I listened to from Laurie Santos, who runs the Happiness Lab podcast. She's a Stanford psychology professor or humanities professor. I don't remember which. Anyway, and she has the most popular class at Stanford on happiness. She ended up with like when they went online, she ended up with like 250,000 students. Anyway, so she started this podcast, which has been very successful, called the Happiness Lab. And one of the episodes, she interviewed really successful serial CEOs. And of course, this idea that these are just the most positive thinkers, the power of positive thinking is the reason, right? They just have the right mantras. All of that she dispelled completely in this episode. That is a fallacy. every single one of these CEOs, when you asked them why they were successful, they'd all, at the surface, they would say, because I was lucky, just the right place, the right time, market conditions shifted in my favor, things like that. When you scratch the surface even a little bit, what you find out is these are all high anxiety people that are sure they're going to fail at every step of their journey, and are brilliant contingency planners. They think, okay, if that happens, that's going to kill my business. So what am I going to do? If this happens? Well, I'm going to lose half my customers. So how can I mitigate that? Right. And that's all they do all night long is think about every mitigation strategy and everything that could cause them to fail. So when the thing happens a year later, they've thought about it. They're not afraid to face it because they know they can mitigate it, because they don't have a detailed mitigation strategy, but they have something notional they thought about that is a possible way to address that. And so they head in that direction. So to them, it feels like it's lucky because nothing happened that didn't fall into the plan in some way. So that's what makes really successful founders, not somebody who's sure, that has a belief system around becoming a unicorn. I mean, look at all the biggest startups, right? Like, just take Facebook. Do you think Zuckerberg thought he had a unicorn? No, he just put something out there, started getting traction, and he said, "Oh, what if we put it at another college? It gets more traction." And he started to realize once the traction happened in such a big way that he could become this could become a unicorn, because it's like, I'm getting incredible traction on this thing, right? But he didn't start there. He had no clue.
Well, how do you avoid then that shiny object syndrome that comes in there? Because I guess, and that's both just with unicorns, but it's more than that. Feature, function. Oh, look how cool this is. How do you settle a founder down and say, look, you're already off the wagon in terms of you're not focused on the problem again. You're focused on shiny objects.
It's a daily effort with some founders and a weekly effort with others. And some founders are very disciplined. And my team might come up with some suggestions they think would make it easier. And really, really disciplined, successful founders will say, yeah, but that's not a critical success factor for somebody buying this feature. If we haven't had any feedback that's telling us that people want that feature or that would pay for that feature, so let's just put it in the roadmaps list somewhere, and we'll consider it again in the future when we get more feedback. That's a disciplined founder. That's the rare founder. So we try to play that role and help the founder by asking them, how much will people pay for this? How do you know that people will pay for that? What's the problem it's really solving? How much does that problem impact your customers right now? How much is it costing them right now? Do they care about this? If you ask them about that problem, would you get anybody leaning forward and saying, I hate that problem, can you make it go away? Right? These are the questions we'll ask founders over and over and over and over again. And hopefully they're getting counseling, right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so I got one more. This is my favorite question of all time. I keep asking it. I'm going to ask it here too. And that is, what is the one area you believe in terms of startups that almost nobody else would agree with you on, though? I mean, one thing that you're sure of, but the rest of the business is like, even maybe your team, they're like, no, I don't believe what David's saying here. No.
That's a really interesting question. My team, they probably believe most anything I say at this point. I mean, and I believe most everything they say because we've gotten in sync. That's really what I was trying to say. Not that I've got them, the wool over their eyes, which maybe I do in some degree, but it's predicting the future that people would, that people don't think about. It's more about what people are not thinking about until I mention it to them. A couple predictions. One is the need for parking garages is going to disappear in the next 5 to 7 years. We'll hit a tipping point and people will stop buying cars because of automated driving and things like Waymo. If you've not been in a Waymo and you're in San Francisco or LA or Phoenix, you should try it because you'll start to recognize it's half the cost of Uber, and that's without any competitors yet. And when there's lots of competitors, the cost is going to go down dramatically, where it's going to make it a luxury to own a car. And the convenience factor will be so high because of the critical mass that will be there, much higher than what we have with Uber, because it requires a driver available in Uber, where this just requires the vehicle. You'll be able to get a Waymo in any city, at least, minute and a half. It'll be like trying to get an Uber in New York City is like that. You get an Uber within a minute or two, you've got your Uber. I was just in New York over the weekend. But Waymos will be even Waymo or the equivalent. Yeah, they're amazing.
I haven't seen any in New York City. That's where I'm usually located, but I haven't seen any really.
When they are ready to go into a city, they'll kind of announce it, and then they'll start in an area, and then they'll slowly kind of branch out, because they really confirm that they can drive every single street in the city confidently before they go into a new city. So that'll be one. And when that happens, all of a sudden there'll be a critical mass, because you'll have people big investors buying these fleets of these vehicles, putting out thousands of these vehicles. And why would you want to own a car and pay insurance and gas and all of this stuff, right? Or electricity costs, when it sits there 90% of the time, unless you buy your car and you go to your app and say, go ahead, and one of the many services grabs your car, and now it's running for that service, making you money. That might be a reason to still own a car, which means critical mass will happen faster. So every single parking garage and parking lot, if you're an owner of any of those, you should be selling them right now while they still have value. That's my number one. Number two, people think AI is going to replace everything, which it's going to replace a lot of things, just like any kind of disruption in an industry. This is maybe a little bigger and broader, but like developers, for example, eventually will you need people like Tekyz or companies like Tekyz? Well, I always look at it like this. Every time there's like the internet, right, changed the idea of an online buying, changed the idea of product distribution and retail dramatically. And Amazon, of course, accelerated that. It didn't reduce the amount of products being purchased, right? It increased it, and more people are producing products like Etsy. You have an entire marketplace of these craftspeople now have a channel for their products that did not before the internet and online buying. So what happens is we're always on the edge of the outside of the sphere, whatever that level of abstraction is. As soon as something new and disruptive comes out, the sphere just gets bigger, and we just have to move out to the outer edge of the sphere. So that's all that's happening with AI and technology and creative jobs and things like that. Is the outer part of that sphere is the people that know how to control and direct and guide and nuance these new AI capabilities. Those are the people out there. And because it's so quick and fast to create these things, there's lots more of them. And that's what will fill the work void. So you just have to be thinking, what's my next sphere, and move in that direction.
Good answers, man. Nicely done. Thank you for the conversation. This has been great. Is there anything that we missed that you would have liked me to have asked? Wow,
I'm trying to think. No, you really asked some killer questions. Well, you could have asked me, what does that mean, evidence for an exceptional software development company, right? But that's probably a whole podcast all by itself. So
what's the 1 minute answer? What's the 1 minute answer?
The 1 minute answer is the level of detail and the ability to capture all these details, such as how many hours are spent on every single thing. How does the actuals compare to estimates? Do you get timesheets, daily timesheets for everybody working on the project every month attached to your invoice, so you can self-audit the development team, things like this, right? The things we do that other companies don't do and can't do because they haven't built the systems and protocols to be able to capture this information without crippling their development teams. So these are just a few of the things when I'm talking to clients and explaining what I mean by exceptional.
Would you bet on the founder first or the technology?
Well, it's hard to separate them. I always bet on the founder first, but if a founder that has the potential to be really successful comes up with some wild idea, not that I will always know that how they see making it successful, because In the one case I told you about, one of my most successful customers, I actually suggested that he wants to consider doing this because I didn't know if he'd make his money back, right? So I don't do that anymore because of that one experience. I recognize that things may not go how I expect, and who am I to suggest that it's going to be successful or fail? But the founder is always first, because a good founder can take a mediocre or even a slightly poor idea and figure out how to channel that into something successful. A bad founder can take the best idea and just run it into the ground because they get focused on all of their own pet projects and belief systems and are not listening to the customer, the market, the problem. Yeah.
Makes
Founder
sense.
always.
Makes sense. I appreciate you being here. You already gave your location, how to reach you, so I think we're good from that perspective. With that, I'll call it a day. And again, I can't thank you enough for being here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and same here. Thank you.
All right, David Hirschfeld, everybody from Tekyz. Thank you for listening. Hit us on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. Love to hear from you, and I'll talk to you next time. See you guys. Bye-bye.